A girl looks at herself in the mirror and wonders how this happened. When she woke up, she was in a completely different room than she had ever seen before. And when she looked in the mirror, it was a different person she wasn't used to seeing. Maybe this is that famous reincarnation she used to read about in mangas and novels. Did she die? She realizes she recognizes this face, but the body and age are a little different from what she remembers from the novel. She reincarnated into the body of Celine, the evil sister of the heroine from her favorite story, Love of the Goddess. Celine abused her position as the Duke's daughter and lived a life of extravagance after mistreating Adele, her sister, and also the heroine of the novel. In the story, she had a miserable death at the hands of the prince. She questions why she had to reincarnate as a villain, especially since she lived a very hard life in her previous one. She had fragile health since childhood, and because of that, she spent almost her entire life in bed, enduring pain and suffering. And the only thing that brought her joy was reading her novels. But now, reincarnated in the villain's body, she can at least move freely, since in her past life, she could barely walk. However, as she remembers that, she trips and falls. Maybe she needs to practice a little more before running. The maids are worried to know if she got hurt, and she notices, as she gets up, someone peeking through the door. A little girl with pink hair, Adele, the lovely protagonist. Unlike her sister Celine, Adele was always known for her stunning beauty and sweet personality. In the original novel, the story follows the heroine falling in love with Prince Louis, who is first in line to the throne, while her sister, now herself, also had feelings for Louis, which led to her mistreating Adele. She ends up joining the second prince, a dark mage, and together they hunt down both the heroine and Prince Louis. Theoretically, it was supposed to be a romance novel about two lovers living happily ever after overcoming great obstacles. Unfortunately, in the original story, the only one who dies is Celine, the character she reincarnated as. And honestly, if she had a sister like that, they'd probably be great friends, especially since, in the original story, Celine only dies because she bullied her. But Adele is still just a kid, so maybe there's still time to turn things around and get a happier ending. Maybe if they become friends, she can completely avoid the death route, which would be great because she'd be doing two good things at once. 1, becoming friends with someone she thinks is amazing, and 2, avoiding her fated death. At first, she felt a bit sad for having reincarnated as the villain after everything she went through in her past life. But now she's very grateful to have received a healthy body, and with this body, she can eat and do whatever she wants. Because of that, she's going to do everything she can to seize this chance to live a happy life and experience things she could never experience in her past life. She then notices that the body she reincarnated into is a bit overweight, so she decides to go on a diet to achieve all the goals she has in this life. Determined, with her plan ready, she calls her sister Adele, who is still waiting by the door. Adele, shocked, since she always had a different impression of Celine, apologizes and runs away. And from her reaction, it seems like the bullying started in childhood and she's afraid of her sister. Worried about this part of her mission, becoming friends with Adele. Days go by as she tries her best to greet her sister, but Adele always runs away in fear, and the maids always help to keep them apart. Our protagonist doesn't give up because, after all, she needs this to avoid the bad ending, death. So she decides on a new tactic. First, she'll focus on her health and her diet, so she starts going on runs during the day. Doing this, she realizes her body is really out of shape, and she can barely run much. Even so, she's grateful because she couldn't even do that in her past life's body. During one of her training runs, she ends up running into her sister and her stepmother, but both are clearly afraid of Celine, so she decides to ignore them and keep running. The Duke starts to notice this strange new habit of Celine, and the butler explains that she's been going on these runs every day for some time, but he doesn't know exactly why. Worried, the Duke asks if there's anything else she has changed, and the butler explains that she is also trying to have more contact with Adele, and that she frequently goes to her sister's room to greet her. The Duke becomes concerned that she might be bullying Adele again, but the butler confirms that she's not, that she's really just trying to talk. During dinner, all the maids are impressed because normally Miss Celine would eat 2 to 3 times more, and now she seems to be eating just a little. Seeing all of this, the Duke finally decides to ask what Celine is planning. Since she realizes that even the Duke doesn't have a good impression of her, she decides to seize this opportunity and show that she has really changed. So Celine puts on her best act and lets a few tears fall, saying she's really sorry for all the trouble she's caused up until now. She says she's finally realized her mistakes, and from now on, she's going to reflect on her actions and live up to the title of being the Duke's daughter. On top of that, she's going to do everything she can to get in shape and take better care of her appearance. Everyone is completely stunned, not knowing what to say. Then she adds that she needs to apologize to Adele for everything she's done and said, admitting she was just jealous of how sweet and loved Adele was by everyone, unlike herself. and she understands if Adele can't forgive her right now, but she hopes that one day she can be forgiven. The Duke, a bit surprised but not really moved by the situation, just says it's fine. She just needs to stay out of trouble. She takes the opportunity to thank him and asks if he can arrange a magic tutor for her, which shocks the maids even more, considering this is coming from someone who used to hate even looking at a book. The Duke agrees. She thanks him, says goodbye, and walks out of the room. A week later, she's still sticking to her morning training and starts to notice the results. Now she feels stronger and can run longer distances without getting so tired. Celine also noticed she's already lost 5 kilos, and at this pace, she'll hit her goal in no time. When she runs into Adele, she casually greets her, and for the first time, her sister actually replies. Touched, she realizes that maybe her heartfelt speech really did have some impact, and Adele's slowly starting to warm up to her. Celine notices Adele is all dressed up and asks if she's going somewhere. Adele says no, she just has a guest. The maid, trying to be protective, quickly steps between them and tells Adele they need to go, since the guest is waiting. Celine realizes it's probably someone important, and they clearly don't want her to find out who it is. A little upset but understanding, she decides to take a longer route on her run to avoid running into whoever might be there. Along the way, she comes across a cute black kitten, and she finds it so adorable that she stops to interact with it, since in her past life, due to her health condition, she couldn't even get close to an animal. The cat doesn't seem very friendly and scratches her hand to show her what she's getting into. Even so, she insists and decides to pick up the cat, which even starts to warm up to her a bit and licks her face. The two run happily through the garden until someone calls her name. When she turns around, she recognizes the prince. Having read so much about him in the novel, even though he's still young, she clearly knows he is the protagonist. From her favorite novel, Louis Percival, he greets her and she wonders what he's doing there. Then she remembers the encounter Adele had and how dressed up she was. So the important guest they were talking about was probably the prince. That's likely why they didn't want Celine near him, because in the original story, she was obsessed with the prince. He ends up interrupting her thoughts and says she seems a little different. She gets a bit embarrassed because she didn't want to meet him like this, disheveled and sweaty as she is. And maybe now she understands why the villain fell in love with him. He is really handsome, which is expected of a protagonist. And on top of that, he is very kind to Celine, even though she's always been a nuisance. The butler and Adele end up finding the two of them in the middle of the garden, and the butler asks what Miss Celine is doing there. She says she was just taking a walk, but then she realizes this is the perfect opportunity to show that she has truly changed. Probably, if she clearly shows that she has no interest in Louis, they might think more positively of her. She then apologizes for her appearance and tells him to make himself at home, saying she needs to head out. Adele says that once she's finished getting changed, she can come and join them. Celine feels a little embarrassed. Adele is just so kind. Even after everything she went through because of Celine, she still does her best to be nice. Our protagonist thanks her and says that she's fine, apologizes for always being a nuisance in the past, and won't get in his way. Content, she thinks she can't wait to see the two of them all lovey-dovey. Later, in her room, the tutor is impressed because she managed to do everything perfectly and asks if Celine would like her to come again next week. Obviously, she says yes and isn't too worried, because probably in the past, Celine used to do terrible things in the first 5 minutes of the lesson to avoid learning anything. And she even understands why the tutor is a bit hesitant. Celine is very grateful that her father gave her a tutor so quickly, and because of that, she's been able to learn a lot about this world. The fact that she can sit at a desk and learn something makes her very happy, and she can't wait to finally start practicing magic. In the novel, the heroine Adele has the power of the goddess, so Celine probably has some magical power too. Finishing her studies, she then decides to go running in the forest behind the mansion until dinner time. The maids are gossiping, impressed that Miss Celine no longer seems interested in the prince, and one of them defends her, saying maybe she just changed her mind. However, with her bad reputation, it's hard for them to believe that's really possible. Little do they know that the protagonist was behind the wall, listening to everything. She decides not to interfere because, after all, what the maids are saying isn't wrong. If she had never reincarnated, Celine's behavior would probably have stayed the same for the rest of her life. But Celine notices that the maid who praised her is probably a good person. She hopes more people will be able to recognize her change. After some time running, she gets tired and lies down on the grass thinking about how hard dieting is. But for the first time, she truly feels alive. She decides to do more muscle training until she sees a shadow behind a tree. She approaches, thinking maybe it's the cat, but it's actually a child who appears to be asleep. He looks a bit dirty, so she worries that maybe he's hurt. Placing her head close to his chest, she realizes he's alive. And since he's not responding, she decides to take him inside to tend to his injuries. As she supports his arm to carry him, she notices several red marks on his chest, looking like tattoos. She doesn't remember any of this from the novel, but she's going to help him either way. And it even feels strange because even though they seem to be the same age, he's much lighter than she is. Determined to save him, she calls a doctor to examine him and asks what happened. The doctor says there doesn't appear to be any serious injury, and he doesn't seem to have any illness. Celine thinks he's going to be okay, but the doctor confirms that actually he's cursed, and probably with a very strong one. With him unable to wake up, she starts researching curses and learns that holy water is likely very effective in weakening the curse's power. It's already the second day since she rescued him, and he still hasn't moved, only kept sleeping. They're managing to feed him, but if he keeps this up, he might not survive. The doctor, after examining him that day, commented that the curse might have been with him since birth, and that it's probably impossible to break. It's more likely that he was abandoned by his parents and became an orphan. Celine, moved by the situation, worries that someone so young has already suffered so much. What could she do to help him? And probably people with curses are very hated, because not even the mansion staff liked that she brought the boy there. The Duke even questioned her and said he would take him back to an orphanage, but Celine strongly opposed that decision. The Duke asks why she's trying so hard to save this child, saying he's not an animal for her to be treating him like this, and she simply can't explain what she felt in her own skin, what she went through in her previous life while she was sick. In her past life, she had also been abandoned by her parents, and the only thing she could do was lie in bed waiting for death. That's why she doesn't want him to go through this alone. She assures the Duke that she won't cause any trouble, and that she herself will take care of the boy. And the Duke gives up arguing with her. The mansion's servants started spreading rumors that the curse was contagious, even though it wasn't. Some even said the curse would bring bad luck, and now everyone is trying to avoid her. By extension, she ended up suffering too, and everyone is being very cold toward her, but she is determined not to give up. And now, the next step is to get holy water to treat him. The protagonist decides to gather some clothes and accessories to sell and get money. Since she's a child, she asks her maids to do it and says she needs the money in cash. Since holy water is very rare and expensive, she can't just ask the Duke because she said she wouldn't cause any problems. Besides, she didn't even like Celine's previous style, so it was a reason to buy new clothes anyway. Returning to the boy's room, she notices he's moving a lot and has a fever. She changes his bandages, holds his hand, and asks him to hang in there, that soon she'll get the holy water. Because all the servants are avoiding him due to the curse and the rumors, she has to do all the work herself, changing his clothes and his bandages. Walking down the corridor, she ends up running into Adele, who is worried about what's going on and is surprised to see that she's taking care of the boy all by herself. Obviously, people would find that suspicious. After all, Celine was a spoiled and selfish child, so it was practically impossible for her to bring an orphan home and still take care of him. She doesn't go into much detail with her sister, just thanks her, and says they'll talk later. In the kitchen, everyone is amazed at how polite she is, which is different from her previous personality. And noticing the bucket is a bit heavy for her child-sized body, a maid helps her. This is Gina, the same maid who defended Celine to the others. Celine is moved that she helped, carried it all the way to the room, and asked her to leave the rest to her. But Gina says no, that she'll help her, it's no problem at all. Celine then asks if Gina isn't afraid of the curse, and she says no, because she knows it's not contagious. Finally, someone who doesn't follow rumors and uses common sense. Celine is touched that Gina is helping. With the money she raised, she buys the holy water. The maid assures her it's real because it was bought directly from the temple. Celine is shocked that such a tiny bottle costs so much. She thanks the maid and takes it straight to the boy. She offers the 3 bottles and falls asleep beside him from being so tired after researching and caring for him all day. When she wakes up, she finds him simply sitting and looking at her in bed. She is very happy because apparently it worked. But when she goes to touch his arm, he just pushes her hand away, looking very angry. The protagonist tries to understand because after all, he's been suffering alone all this time, so he'll naturally have his guard up around strangers. With a different approach, she tries to introduce herself, saying that she's Celine, that she found him in the forest near the house and brought him here to take care of him, that he only regained consciousness after she managed to acquire 3 bottles of holy water to weaken the curse. Since the boy doesn't seem to respond at all, she goes on saying she has no intention of hurting him and that she prepared food for him. So if he's hungry, he should go eat. She then says goodbye while he doesn't say a word and tells him she'll see him later. Leaving the room, the protagonist realizes it's the first time she's seen someone with such a cold look. It would be so much easier if he would just open up to her. 3 days after he woke up, she visited him every day to see if he could talk or eat something, but the boy simply hasn't said a word or eaten any food since then. The protagonist tried everything. She sat and ate near him so he could see it wasn't poisoned, tried to get him to eat with her, left the food there for him to eat alone, and even so, he still didn't eat. And now that's starting to worry her, because if he doesn't eat anything, he might end up dying. The only thing she's grateful she's managed to do so far is run away. She believes it's because he's so weak and can barely get out of bed. Determined not to give up, she leaves the food again. Leaves, comes back at lunchtime with some flowers to try to lighten the mood, but still nothing happens. And this continues for the next few days. She makes a point of apologizing to the kitchen staff because, after all, they're making food and the boy hasn't touched anything yet. But the servants ask her not to give up because he'll probably eat. As soon as he gets hungry, he'll want to touch the food. She wonders if maybe she's doing something wrong or forcing something she shouldn't. But remembering her old life, she thinks she would have liked if someone had done this for her. On the 5th day, the symptoms of the curse start to fade a little, but the doctor warned that his life would be in danger if he didn't eat. So she goes to his room again with a bowl, and when she tries to offer him some soup, he simply knocks the spoon away and it flies everywhere. Feeling helpless, she starts to cry, not knowing what to do, and apologizes to him for forcing him to do something he didn't want to. Unable to control herself, she runs out of the room so he won't see her crying. That same night, the boy gets up from his bed and finally starts walking around the house with difficulty until he hears a group of maids talking about Miss Celine's intentions. Why did she bring this cursed boy into the mansion? What were her true intentions? They also mention that she sold her accessories and her expensive dresses just to buy a bottle of holy water. That all of this is very strange. They can't believe Celine did all that to save someone she barely knows. Even though they don't believe in her kindness, maybe Gina was right and Celine really has changed. Hearing this, the boy decides to go back to the room he was staying in. The next morning, Celine, determined to go again, gets up to see if today she can get him to eat. After all, yesterday was a complete disaster. When she enters, she sees that he put on the clothes she had prepared for him, and he apologizes for what happened yesterday. She offers the food, placing it on the table in front of him, and wonders if she should stay or just go back to her room. But before she can decide, he starts moving toward it to finally have his first meal. Moved, she thanks him for finally eating. Back in the kitchen, she tells the servant that he finally ate 5 spoonfuls of food, that this is truly progress, and everyone celebrates with her. They start planning what kind of food they should prepare for the next meal so that he can digest it easily. During dinner at the mansion, everyone notices that Celine is way too excited, and before her father can comment about the orphan in the mansion, Celine tells them that for the first time he ate something, and even though it wasn't much, it was a big step. After that first day he ate, he's been eating more little by little and improving. Worried because he still looks very skinny, she thinks that maybe she could give him some of the fat from her own body. Her father is happy for her and asks why she hasn't spent any of her allowance this month. Celine says nothing has caught her interest, and her father reminds her that at the end of this month, they'll be meeting the first prince who will be throwing a garden party, and so she needs to prepare for the event. Adele says she doesn't know what she's going to wear and that she'll probably go shopping next week. Celine imagines that practically anything would look good on Adele, and without meaning to, she says out loud that she'd like to choose a dress for her sister. Realizing she really said that, she apologizes, but Adele is very happy and tells her to join her for the dress shopping. Touched that her sister accepted, Celine says it'll be a pleasure to buy a dress with her. Maybe only Adele has noticed that her sister Celine has changed for the better. In the room of the cursed boy, Celine brings him food while telling him about her day, especially about how she'll go shopping with her sister next week and how happy that makes her, and how determined she is to lose weight to finally have a healthy body, and maybe she's already lost some during the time she spent caring for the boy. She asks if he needs anything, like a toy, a book, but since he doesn't seem to respond, she then tries asking what his name is, and he answers only one word, Will. Our protagonist is very happy because it finally seems like there's some progress. At least now she knows his name, and maybe they can get to know each other better. Meanwhile, at the royal palace, it seems that Prince Louis is worried about whether Celine will attend his party. His servant says that clearly she will, whether she's invited or not, and Prince Louis wonders if maybe that's true, that the last time they saw each other, she didn't seem like the same person as before. Beautiful anxiety. On the long-awaited shopping day, Celine is excited because literally everything looks perfect on her sister, which even makes her excited and choose many dresses for Adele. Our heroine, who had a lot of money left over, decided that since Adele looks good in everything, she intends to spend it all on clothes and accessories for her dear sister. However, even though she finds Celine's initiative cute, Adele also decides to offer to choose something for her sister. After all, they will both attend the party and need to look beautiful. They spend the afternoon shopping, eating, and having fun like best friends. On On the way back, Celine comments that she had a lot of fun with Adele today, and even bought a small souvenir for Will, and she realized how close she became to her sister this afternoon. Adele, moved and emotional for finally connecting with Celine, begins to cry. The protagonist becomes worried after all. She has been behaving and trying to have the best relationship with her sister. But why is she crying? The pink-haired girl, very emotional, explains that she is very happy to be spending these moments with her sister, and that she always wanted them to be friends. The two hug while crying, and Celine realizes how much Adele must have suffered for keeping hopes in her, even after everything she had been through. The way home is long, and they end up calming down while holding hands. Celine then decides that she will be the best older sister anyone could have. When arriving home, Celine immediately goes to tell Will everything that happened and shows all the presents she brought for him, clothes, toys, and even sweets, all because she didn't know what he might like. The boy doesn't seem to show much reaction, even after hearing how happy Celine was during the shopping and how she thought of him. But suddenly he says a few words, shyly thanking her for the gifts. 1 month later, Jenna is doing Celine's hair. She is now her new personal maid. Previously, Celine didn't have anyone in that role, precisely because she always caused trouble and drove everyone away. But now that she has changed, her father, 3 weeks ago, decided to assign Jenna to assist her. And it seems the two get along very well. After all this time training, Celine already looks much slimmer than before, but she still believes she can improve if she keeps working hard. Especially because when she's near her sister, Adele, she feels she's still far from where she should be. In the last month, Celine has worked hard to build a friendship with both Adele and her stepmother, and she's been having afternoon tea in the garden whenever possible. Meanwhile, Will continues living at the mansion and is much more talkative now than he used to be. Even though he seems to be better, and Celine continues visiting him every day, when he overexerts himself or takes long walks, he still runs a fever, so he remains mostly in his room. Even though their relationship has improved a lot, he still hasn't opened up about his past. So usually the conversations revolve around Celine's daily life and her telling him stories from her own life. Since she noticed he has a hard time with general knowledge, she decided to teach him about food, how to write, how to read. And now he follows her everywhere, even though some servants still don't accept him well. Because in the afternoon, Celine invites Will to take a walk in the garden. When they reach a tree full of mushrooms, Celine is impressed by the quantity. But Will warns her that those mushrooms, if eaten, can cause shortness of breath. She asks where he learned that, and he says he once tried to eat them when he was hungry and had that symptom. This makes Celine's heart ache, because the life he had before meeting her was clearly very harsh. Because of that, she impulsively hugs him and says she's going to protect him from everything from now on. Celine leaves him in his room and says goodbye, explaining that she still needs to go for a run as part of her diet plan. And he asks why. She reveals that actually she's doing all this because she feels fat. But surprisingly, Will says she's cute enough and doesn't need to lose weight. She gets super embarrassed because no one had ever said that to her. Not that she was good or cute. She thanks him and says that even so, she's going to keep working hard because one day she wants to fall in love and find her true prince. She also warns him that tomorrow she won't be able to visit because there will be a party at the palace, but that Jenna will stay with him all day. So he needs to behave. Celine mentions again that her sister Adele will probably look really adorable tomorrow. That's when Will asks if she likes Adele. She agrees. After all, Adele is the most important person in her life, and she says goodbye. Will is left alone thinking how nice it would be if that person were him. On the day of the palace party, Adele and Celine look beautiful in their new dresses. But Celine is a bit worried that her reputation in society might not be good. Some girls approach, trying to talk to Adele, but when they notice Celine, they don't seem very friendly. Usually when people see that she's present, they avoid even making eye contact, because she only causes trouble and mistreats Adele. For the first time, Celine realizes that she's truly hated, but since she's the Duke's daughter, no one says it directly to her. Wanting to avoid causing any trouble for Adele, she decides to step away. But before she can leave, her sister grabs her arm and says she's really happy that they're getting to spend time together. Everyone is shocked by Adele's reaction. But before anyone can say or comment anything, the prince appears to greet the two of them. Celine is impressed by how handsome he looks today, and when she realizes he's staring at her, she starts to feel insecure. Maybe that dress doesn't suit her, or maybe she looks ugly. However, the only thing that matters now is trying to leave some time alone for Louis and Adele. Before she can come up with an excuse, Adele says that her mother is calling her and politely excuses herself from the prince and Celine, saying they can talk freely. At that moment, Celine starts to worry. Maybe Adele thinks she still has feelings for the prince, and that might ruin their whole romance. The prince, on the other hand, doesn't seem to care much and even smiles, saying it will be a pleasure to talk with Celine. He takes her hand and leads her toward the garden. As they pass by, all the adults focus their attention on the two of them together, especially because of the history that Celine used to be obsessed with the prince. But the protagonist is only worried about having a conversation with him as herself. The one who breaks the silence is Louis, saying that everyone is very impressed with Celine's changes and he wonders what made her change so much. Celine thanks him and says she's really been working hard to change, and it all happened because she realized that for a long time she was a selfish and awful person. She hesitates a little because, after all, she can't really tell him the reason she changed, that she reincarnated into Celine's body. But she simply says that before, she took too much advantage of her position as a noble to do literally whatever she wanted, and beyond that, she was extremely jealous of her perfect sister. She even asks the prince if he didn't think she was a despicable person before, but that now she's doing her best not to cause any more problems. The prince says she doesn't need to worry because he himself never thought of her as a problem. She's surprised because, just like Adele, Louis is also a very generous person, and it makes her want them to end up together. Louis comments that in a conversation with the Duke mentioned that Celine was studying about the country and also practicing magic, that it was amazing and honorable of her. Celine is touched because she never thought her father would speak well of her, and it feels like she's truly on the right path. Happy, Celine mentions that she's also lost a lot of weight, already more than 10 kilos, and the prince agrees that she's looking more and more beautiful. Even though she knows he's only saying that out of politeness, she thanks him. They continue talking for a few hours until the prince says they should return to the party hall soon, but that he's really happy to have talked so much with her. Celine is amazed by how easy it is to talk to him. As they say goodbye, the prince asks if he can visit her again at her mansion, and of course she misinterprets it, thinking he wants to see Adele and is just using this as an excuse. She agrees and says he can come whenever he wants. Back with her sister at the banquet, Celine celebrates because in the future, it's actually Louis who kills Celine. So if she becomes his friend, he probably won't kill her. After the banquet, a few days later, Celine, Will, and Adele are having tea, and she worries because she wasn't able to make any friends during the banquet. Since people's impression of her is so bad, just changing a little wasn't enough for others to approach her. Adele encourages her, saying that next time she will definitely be able to talk with more people and make friends, that Adele will do everything she can to help her. And Celine says it would be really nice if Will could make some friends too, but he says he doesn't need any, because the only person he needs is Celine. She finds that super cute, but also a little obsessive. Celine then says that she treats Will like her little brother and that she loves him very much, just like she also loves her sister, Adele. Adele is touched, but she finally brings up the subject and asks if Celine and Prince Louis talked a lot yesterday and grew closer. Celine sees this as a chance to clear up the misunderstanding, so she confesses to her sister that, actually, she's not interested in Prince Louis anymore, and that Adele doesn't need to worry about her. This leaves Adele a bit confused, since her sister used to be so obsessed with the prince. Will gets curious and asks who this prince is, and Celine explains that he's the first prince of the country, in line for the throne, and that he's a very kind person. Clearly jealous, Will asks if Celine likes this prince guy, and she tries to dodge the question by saying she used to like him before, but not anymore. A few days have passed, and it's finally the day that Louis will visit the mansion. All the servants seem busy trying to prepare the perfect reception, but Celine is the least worried about the situation because she believes it has nothing to do with her and everything to do with Adele. She goes to the library to help Will, as always, with his studies, and he seems to be progressing well. Celine is always impressed by how quickly Will learns things. He's really very smart, and he's already looking much healthier than before. She notices that Will is staring out the window, and when she checks, she sees it's the prince who has arrived. Will comments that the prince is completely different from him, but before their conversation can continue, a maid knocks on the door with a message that the Duke has ordered Celine to join the prince for afternoon tea. She's surprised because the Duke has never invited her before to participate, and she says goodbye to Will. Before she can leave, he grabs her hand and asks her not to go. Even though Celine assures Will that she'll be right back, he simply lets go of her hand, and she realizes this is the first time he's rebelled and hasn't done what she said. She really would like to stay, especially since he's looking like a sad little puppy, but she simply can't refuse her father, who is the Duke, and the prince of the country. Holding Will's arms, she tells him there's no way around it. She really has to go, but she'll come back soon, and this clearly upsets him, making him think she's only going because of the prince. In the room where tea is being served, Celine is doing her best to return to Will as soon as possible, but both Prince Louis and Adele keep talking directly to her. This makes it harder for her to slip away unnoticed. Finally, she realizes that, according to the novel, these two were supposed to be starting to develop a relationship or at least show interest in one another. But what she sees is that both of them have a genuine interest in her and don't seem to be making much romantic progress between themselves. Tired of the situation, she says she really needs to go. Confused, the prince asks if she has something to do, and Adele asks if she's going to see Will. Since the prince doesn't know Will, Adele explains that he's a boy Celine found in the forest and that she's been taking care of him ever since. However, the prince doesn't understand why Celine is spending her time taking care of someone she barely knows. Wouldn't it be easier to just leave him in an orphanage? Celine tries to explain that she's taking care of him because she was the one who brought him to the mansion. Even though Prince Louis is kind, she can't just tell him that Will is cursed because she knows how people react to that. Adele comments on how close the two are and sparks Louis's curiosity about meeting Will too. Because of Will's reaction when she mentioned Prince Louis before, she really doesn't want them to meet and tries to come up with an excuse, saying she'll introduce them next time. As days go by, Prince Louis starts visiting the mansion more frequently, even on days when her sister Adele isn't home. After saying goodbye to the prince once again, she starts wondering why he keeps coming back to visit the Duke's mansion so often. The butler who's there with her says it might be because the king ordered him to find a bride, since recently the aristocrats have been gaining too much power, so he urgently needs to find someone to marry and eventually inherit the country. Celine asks if Adele isn't the bride he's looking for, but the butler agrees that the chosen one will indeed be from a duke's family, though it hasn't been decided yet. So technically, it's not Adele yet. Celine believes the butler only said that so he wouldn't have to say that she doesn't even have a chance of being chosen. But poor clueless Celine still hasn't realized that the prince actually likes her. On a quiet afternoon with Will, Celine comments on how nice it is to read a book peacefully in the afternoon, something she hadn't done in a long time. Will replies that it's because an annoying one is visiting too often. And Celine realizes that ever since the prince started visiting, Will has been clinging to her more and more, like a shadow, which makes things more difficult because he simply doesn't talk to Jenna or Adele, only to Celine. Even though she wants him to interact with others, she doesn't want to push him to do it against his will, so she decides to take things slowly. They decide to take a walk in the garden and notice how large the flowers have already grown, probably due to the arrival of spring, thinking that maybe Will might really like flowers, and who knows, maybe even become the mansion's gardener in the future? Celine asks what he likes, and he simply answers, Celine. A little embarrassed since that wasn't exactly what she was asking, she replies that she really likes him too. It seems our protagonist is finally stepping into his obsessed side, and he tells Celine that since he likes her so much, he also wants to be number one to her. Pure-hearted Celine even gets flustered by this declaration and thinks that she can't rank the people she loves and how much she loves each one, so she's not sure how to respond to him. She simply says, he and Adele are number one to her, but judging by his expression, that's not really what he wanted to hear. As they begin heading back to the mansion, Will suddenly stops and Celine is confused until she sees the prince just ahead. She didn't even know he would be coming today. Her father explains that since he had a meeting at the palace with the prince, he simply invited him to spend the afternoon at their home. Noticing the boy next to Celine, Louis asks if this is the famous Will she's always talking about. The prince tries to talk to Will, but he completely ignores him and even gives him a scornful look. Sensing the hostility, Celine tries to step in so things don't get worse. She tries to play it off by saying Will is very shy, but the prince says that he's the one in the wrong. After all, he showed up out of nowhere without warning. Feeling Will gripping her sleeve and trembling, Celine apologizes and says he isn't feeling very well and excuses herself. In the mansion's hallway, Celine tries to understand what Will is going through, but Will can't answer. He can only think about the people who hated him, the people who abandoned him until now, and how he can't forgive any of them. Hugging him, Celine tries to calm him down, worried that something triggered all the trauma he suffered in his life. And after a few hours of crying, he finally stops and looks at Celine. She asks if he's feeling better now, and he simply nods. Determined to help him, she says that from now on, she'll do everything she can to erase all the sad memories he has. Happy with Celine's words, Will asks if that means she'll live with him forever, and she realizes he's probably feeling that fear of abandonment, since he's been abandoned since. As she knows exactly what that feeling is like, she says she won't abandon him, and that they'll live together. The little guy simply says it's a promise as he hugs her. In the morning, Jenna is helping Celine with her hair and comments on how beautiful her eyes are. They seem to shine. Celine thanks her and is happy that everything is going well, so different from her past. She comments that her eyes are also beautiful because of their golden color. Jenna explains that Prince Louis's eye color is golden and adds that it's a specific shade only royalty can have. Celine, on the other hand, prefers black eyes because they remind her of her past life. They bring a sense of nostalgia. Completing her daily routine of studying, training magic, Celine truly appreciates her free time spent with Will and Adele. She realizes these peaceful days are really nice and she wishes they could stay that way. However, as it's written in the story, in the future the protagonists will have trouble with the villain. That's why she needs to keep an eye on the villain, since he is the second prince and also the final boss of the novel. Born with a curse, the second prince was ordered to be killed by his own father, the king, but with the help of his nanny, he managed to escape. However, he probably had a very difficult life after that, completely different from the first prince, Louis, who was raised with love and care. Because of that past in the novel, the second prince tries to kill the entire royal family, including Prince Louis. She even understands the hatred he must have toward the family. After all, they were the ones who abandoned him. But she knows that, just like in the novel, if the second prince dares to attack them, the heroic power of Louis and the divine power of Adele will be enough to defeat him and save everyone in the end. That's why she's not too worried about them, in this case. Because in the novel, the only one who dies is Celine. So she needs to worry about her own life. Celine wonders what exactly this curse of the second prince is. Is it similar to the one Will has? Maybe he suffers more, maybe less than Will. She then decides to ask Will how he's been feeling lately, and he simply replies that he's fine. But since he hesitated, she wonders if he's hiding something. And he promises that he's really fine, that he's not hiding anything from her. Upon returning to the mansion, they say goodbye, and Will says he's tired and going to sleep. Meanwhile, Adele and Celine decide to play a card game before dinner. Alone in his room, Will doesn't look well at all, and it even seems like the curse is getting worse. The next day, Celine is admiring herself in the mirror until she notices the butler watching all of it, and he asks what she's doing. Embarrassed, she says she was just admiring herself since she recently lost a significant amount of weight. So, she was looking to see how her body had changed. Since she created this plan, she hasn't skipped a single day. She's been exercising daily. Even on her busiest days, she manages to find time between lessons and magic practice. She's also learned to eat less in order to make some dietary restrictions and reduce her appetite. Even with all that effort, she still believes she needs to lose a little more weight, because next to Adele, she's still a bit chubbier. Celine asks the butler if he knows any tips for losing weight, and he says that lately people have been talking about horseback riding or sword training being exercises that burn a lot of fat. The next day, Celine finally hosts her first tea party. Since she had mentioned to her stepmother that she'd like to make new friends, it was suggested that she throw a tea party for young ladies her age. Because it was her stepmother who selected the guests, Celine wasn't very comfortable, and the girls didn't seem interested in talking either. She tries to understand that it's because of Celine's past, but she believes she has improved a lot, so maybe something will change. Thankfully, Adele is there to save the conversation and starts talking about how delicious the sweets are and how her sister always tries her best to make everyone feel welcome. All this just to help the girls interact more with Celine. A friendly noble asks if Celine has finally made peace with Adele. This is Miss Wilhelmina, daughter of a marquess. She goes on to say that it's strange because Celine used to badmouth and mock Adele in front of everyone. Celine, trying to end the subject once and for all, says that she was the one who apologized to Adele for everything she had done, and that's why they are friends now. What was keeping them apart before was simply Celine's jealousy toward her sister, which made her do terrible things. Since her sister managed to forgive her even after everything, Celine is committed to becoming a better person. To everyone's surprise, Wilhelmina says that if Adele forgave Celine, who is she to judge? And she eats the first sweet saying it's good. That makes the other girls start eating too and talking about how delicious everything is. And finally, the tea party becomes lively and sociable. At the end of the day, Celine decides to thank Wilhelmina for helping the others get closer and asks if she can be her friend. Wilhelmina just smiles and says of course they can be friends, and that she'll visit more often from now on. During dinner, Celine happily tells her parents that she finally made her first friend. And obviously, it was all thanks to Adele. It seems like things are getting better. Even her father is impressed with her grades and with the praise from her tutors. Will has also started working to help out, and over the last month, he's been assisting the gardener from time to time. And even the gardener is praising how helpful Will is. Of course, he's doing everything to please Celine, the person he likes the most. As for our protagonist, she is increasingly grateful for having reincarnated into a healthy body, learned how to make new friends, and experienced family love. But of course, this won't last forever. A few days later, Adele is admiring the flower she received from Will, since it was the first gift he ever gave her. She even prepared a powerful enchantment to preserve the flower for a longer time. Seeing how happy she looks, Will asks if she'd be even happier if he gave her more gifts. And she says that even though gifts do make her happy, what would make her even happier is seeing him live a happy and healthy life. He is left speechless with a somewhat confused expression. Celine notices his reaction and asks if everything is all right. He simply holds her arm and says it's nothing. However, she noticed that lately he's been acting a little different from usual. He constantly says he's fine, but he's eating less and less. Interestingly, there was another day when he refused to be examined by the doctor, and since Celine didn't want to force him into anything, she let it go. But since he's been behaving this way lately, she wonders if maybe it would be important to ask the doctor to check on him again. Continuing her magic training, the protagonist realizes that Celine's body has a very good magical potential, and it's even sad to realize that, during the novel, Celine never explored that side. It's practically a wasted talent, which, because she reincarnated into this body, is finally being used. In this novel, only 30% of the world's population can control magic, and there are 4 basic elements: fire, water, wind, and earth. Each person has their compatibility, and to start magic training, it's important to know your specialty. Since Celine had already learned water and fire magic, her teacher offers to teach her earth magic today, which excites her, because maybe with that magic she can help Will even more. But even after several attempts, she realizes that she's not compatible with earth magic. Upset, she comes across a flower bed, and one of the flowers looks like it's at the end of its days. She tries then to see if she can use a little magic to revitalize the flower. But when she tries, a light appears behind the flower, even though its appearance doesn't change. However, a short while later, the flower begins to change and return to its original form. She asks her teacher what that was. Surprised by what Celine just did, he only responds that they need to end training for today and leaves quickly, leaving Celine confused. Later, Celine is called by her father to his quarters, and she's a little nervous because when he calls her out of nowhere like that, she's afraid she did something wrong. However, before entering her father's quarters, she runs into Adele in the hallway, who says she's very happy for Celine, since their father commented to the maids that today would be a day of celebration. Not understanding anything, Celine finally enters her father's study, where her magic teacher, the butler, and the Duke are present. After a brief silence, her father finally speaks. He says it seems that Celine has awakened the power of the goddess, since this afternoon she managed to revitalize a flower that was already wilting, and that's a type of healing magic. And this magic normally belongs to the goddess's power. Celine interrupts her father and says there must be some mistake because she doesn't have the power of the goddess. Clearly, Celine remembers that in the novel, the one who possesses the power of the goddess is her sister Adele, and there's no way the villain of the novel would have that power. Her father simply ignores her and asks the teacher to bring a darkened crystal. He approaches Celine and asks her to focus her energy into the crystal. As she gets near the crystal, it glows and instantly changes to a light blue color. Everyone is impressed, and the teacher explains that the crystal had been bathed in dark energy and Celine managed to purify it, thus confirming that she really does possess the power of the goddess, since no other type of magic could do that. Celine still hasn't been able to respond. She's simply shocked to learn that she has the power of the goddess, different from what happened in the novel. But while she's recovering from her shock, her father says that he's very proud, that he didn't expect the power of the goddess to be inside her, but that it's an honor and should be celebrated throughout the country. The only thing the poor girl can think about is how this is going to change the story. Is all of this happening because she's the villain who changed her ways and became a good person? What will happen to Adele if she doesn't have the power of the goddess? And Prince Louis, who will fight the villain now? How is she supposed to deal with this story now? To top off this whirlwind of information and questions for Celine, her father says that she will now officially become Prince Louis's fiancée. Since the power of the goddess is extremely precious and special, the king will surely choose her as the crown prince's bride. And judging by Celine's recent behavior, she will certainly be able to fulfill that role. This was definitely not what Celine had been working so hard for. At no point did she want to ruin the romance between the main protagonists of the novel. And now, being Prince Louis's fiancé, how are he and Adele supposed to fall in love and be together forever? The next afternoon, Celine and Will are in the library reading, but Celine seems more distracted than usual, since the night before they even had a celebratory dinner because she had awakened the power of the goddess. It was the first time she had seen her father so happy. Since the Archbishop will return from his trip abroad in 2 weeks, he will officially confirm the power. And if it's really confirmed, everything in Celine's life will change. Even after the news, she tried a few things. She fell, hurt her knee, and was able to heal it. So it really seems like she has some kind of healing power. How can a novel have the villain gain the heroine's power? It's all become very confusing. And Adele's happy future now seems to be getting further away. While she's questioning what to do and how to help Adele have her happy ending, Will notices something's wrong and asks her what's going on. It seems Celine isn't ready to tell Will everything that's happened and simply changes the subject. At that moment, he feels a sharp pain in his chest, likely the curse. And he too, hiding things from her, dodges the question and says he's just hungry. On another afternoon, Celine, Adele, and Louis are having tea. And Louis comments that he heard about Celine's goddess powers. Adele seems super excited for her sister, but Celine, still hoping it's all a misunderstanding, says that it's probably some mistake, and that it's not truly the goddess's power. Of course, the two of them aren't convinced by this little excuse, since she made a flower bloom again and also managed to purify a cursed crystal. That definitely isn't a mistake. To better understand what's happening, Celine asks Louis if he knows how someone is chosen by the goddess to receive her power. And he says that the legend is that a person with noble blood and a large amount of magic who possesses a beautiful heart, cherished by the goddess, will be chosen. It's in that moment that she realizes she was the one who ruined everything, since her family has always been known for having a large amount of magical power. And because she made a radical change in her life and behavior, that made her someone with a beautiful heart. But maybe her sister has an even more beautiful heart than hers, and it's possible the goddess will love her sister too. She asks Prince Louis if maybe it's possible for the goddess to give her power to two people instead of one. He says that normally it's not possible, but there are, in history, a few reports of multiple people appearing with the goddess's power, though it happened many years ago and it was only a single recorded case. That fills our protagonist with hope, that maybe she and Adele both have the goddess's power, and then everything will be fine. But she worries if that will take too long, because if she marries Prince Louis, how will Adele later take her rightful place? Adele simply stands up and says she's going to get her sister's favorite sweets and leaves, leaving just Celine and Louis at the table, thinking that maybe this situation is a little awkward because clearly Louis knows she's a potential fiancé. She believes that Louis probably prefers Adele, not her. He decides to break the silence and asks if she would like to go out with him over the weekend. She finds it a bit strange, but since she can't refuse the prince's invitation, she accepts. Later, in her room, she and Adele are talking, and when Celine mentions that the prince invited her out for the weekend, Adele comments that it's probably a date, since in her past life she never interacted with anyone of the opposite sex, let alone had a romantic relationship. She didn't realize that, by all signs, it really did look like a date. Even her sister seems a little worried, since it looks like Prince Louis is falling for Celine. But Celine has had a change of heart and no longer likes the prince the way she used to. Celine finally decides to ask her sister what she really feels for Prince Louis. But to her surprise, her sister says she doesn't feel anything at all for him. Confused, Celine thinks that in the novel, by this point, they should already be in love. Could it be that this changed because she changed? Her sister, not at all shaken by the questions, is just focused on picking a dress for Celine to look beautiful on her date. The next day at the Marquis Foray's house, Celine is talking to Wilhelmina, who, just like her sister, is also convinced that Prince Louis invited Celine on a date, mainly because she believes Prince Louis isn't the type to invite a young lady without a reason. It was the first time Celine had tea with the Marquise's daughter since they became friends, and Celine was very nervous. But Wilhelmina is a person with a refreshing and easygoing personality, so the conversations were easier than she imagined. Wilhelmina notices Celine's hesitation and asks if she isn't honored to be going on a date with the prince. But the protagonist can only respond that she believes there's someone more suitable than her, while thinking he should have called her sister Adele and not her. Celine adds that she knows it's difficult in her position, but her dream is to marry someone for love and have a normal and simple marriage. Wilhelmina is shocked by this side of Celine and comments that she is cuter than she imagined. Even though nobles usually marry for political reasons, there are indeed some who marry truly for love, so it's possible that Celine could do the same, especially since her own father was one of those cases. Right after the Duke's former wife died in childbirth, Celine's mother, he fell in love with his current wife and had Adele. That's exactly why Celine didn't like them. Wilhelmina says she'll be rooting for her friend to find someone she loves and get married. It seems the two got quite a bit closer that day. Finally, the day of the date arrived. Celine was clearly nervous while her maid helped her get ready. After finishing, Jenna says how beautiful Celine looks, but the protagonist only asks Jenna to follow the plan as soon as Will gets distracted. A few days ago, worried about Will's health, Celine called the doctor twice, but Will refused to be examined and just locked himself in his room. And that's why today she needs the doctor to examine him, because she's getting really worried about his health and whether the curse has gotten worse. She would really like to be by his side at this moment, but her worry won't let her wait any longer just to be present, so it has to be today. She says goodbye to Jenna and heads to her date. Later, Louis and Celine are having dinner while talking about the amazing opera they just watched. Prince Louis came to pick her up at the mansion, they watched an opera at the theater, and now they are having dinner at a fancy restaurant. The prince is clearly a true gentleman, and thanks to his meticulous attention to detail, Celine is managing to enjoy herself a lot. Louis asks if Celine is prepared for the test day at the temple, which will happen in 2 days. Celine says she's a little nervous because she hasn't used the goddess's power since the last test. But the truth is, starting tomorrow, Celine will be staying at the temple to have her power tested, and that's why she's doing her best to pretend she's unable to use the goddess's power. But maybe that won't be enough to fool the archbishop, since he's well known for his special powers. And that's making her very nervous because she doesn't see how she'll be able to avoid this situation. She even researched more about the goddess's powers, but all she could find was that the power can purify dark magic and heal wounds. The healing magic, apparently, can only be used if you let your mana flow while praying for the wounds to be healed. Louis interrupts her thoughts, asking if Celine would like more bread, but she declines, saying she's still on a diet. At that moment, Louis says, exactly like Will, that Celine is cute the way she is and doesn't need to be dieting. For the first time, she realizes that they actually look quite similar in appearance, even though their hair and eye colors are practically opposites. Celine thanks him, but she still believes Louis only said that out of politeness. Since the prince wants to be a gentleman, he prefers not to stay with Celine too late so the duke doesn't get annoyed and decides to say goodbye. But before Celine gets into the carriage, she notices a boy fallen and crying in the street. Quickly, she goes to ask if the boy is okay and sees that he scraped his knee. She looks around and, yep, folks, our protagonist seems slower than we imagined. She simply decided to heal the boy's wound with the power of the goddess. My God. She told the impressed boy that it's a secret and he can't tell anyone. From a distance, Louis watches Celine's kindness already looking all smitten. Upon arriving at the mansion, Prince Louis helps Celine down from the carriage and thanks her for going out today, saying it was a lot of fun, and if she allows it, he'd like to invite her again. Celine also enjoyed the date a lot, and even though she doesn't want to go down that path with the prince, she simply can't refuse him. The deluded one even watches the carriage leave, thinking how Louis is a good person and that he should just fall in love with Adele already. Oh, Celine. But the colorful world ends the moment she enters the house. Adele comes running, crying, towards Celine saying something happened with Will. She runs to the room to see, and apparently the curse has returned and he's once again in a deep sleep, suffering with pain and fever. The doctor explains that even if he seemed fine on other days, it's very hard to predict the progression of a curse, especially one as strong as Will's. He probably had been suffering in silence as the symptoms advanced. Celine asks if it would be possible to improve him again if she buys more holy water, but the doctor says the holy water will only ease the symptoms. And with the curse worsening like this, he doesn't believe it'll have much effect. He probably thinks there's nothing else that can be done. Celine panics, afraid of what might happen to Will, and it's impressive that with the boy who scraped his knee, she didn't think twice about using her power. But with Will, she simply forgot she has purification and healing powers. After a day since Will entered the worsened state of the curse, his condition really got worse, and he seems to be suffering more and more each day. Even though the doctor said it wouldn't work, Celine still tried giving him the holy water again, but it really didn't work. Not knowing what else to do, she remembers the doctor's words from yesterday. Curses aren't something you can fight against, so please don't blame yourself too much. But Celine can't just give up, especially because Will had been suffering in silence for who knows how long, and it breaks her heart not being able to help him. Jenna enters the room saying that Celine will have to go to the temple tomorrow, so the Duke asked her to get ready since it's something very important, and because Celine hasn't eaten anything since yesterday, Jenna is also very worried. Even though the protagonist knows there's nothing she can do just by sitting at Will's side, she simply doesn't want to leave him, not even for a moment. Jenna, realizing this, says she'll bring the books about the temple that Celine needs to read for tomorrow, and also some snacks for her, and the protagonist thanks her maid for the kind gesture. Later, while reading the books, she notices that there are a lot of rules in the temple, how to greet people, how to walk, etc., until she comes across something more interesting. The book says that the power of the goddess saved the life of the first king. The king had been cursed by a dragon, and only the power of the goddess was able to heal him. Finally, Celine realizes that the power of the goddess can heal curses. But even though she read everything, the book didn't say exactly how to use the powers, so she decides she'll try to figure it out in practice. First, she holds Will's hand and decides to try the healing method, praying for the curse to disappear while letting her mana flow. As soon as she tries, her body shines, and she starts feeling pain and her temperature rising. It seems like this is what Will had been feeling all along. This makes Celine even more determined to pull Will out of that suffering and keep using her power until the curse disappears completely. She notices that little by little Will is becoming calmer, and the curse seems to be slowly decreasing, but she's afraid that her mana and magic won't last much longer, since she hasn't even learned how to use her power properly yet. Celine remembers all her moments with Will and keeps doing her best to heal him, because what she wants the most is for him to be happy. The protagonist wakes up in a bed with strong pain in her body. Adele and Jenna are nearby, worried if Celine is okay. She probably fainted from using so much power and mana at once. She quickly gets up, worried about where Will is, and her sister says he's fine. The curse's symptoms have lessened, but he's still sleeping. That makes Celine very relieved, but her sister is clearly angry with the protagonist's irresponsibility, since she used her power until she passed out, and that is very dangerous. Celine apologizes and understands her sister's concern. Even her magic teacher had warned her about the consequences of using up all her mana at once. Adele explains that she didn't tell anyone about Celine or even Will's condition, not even their father, afraid he might do something to Will. This moves Celine, seeing how her sister really is amazing and kind. She even went behind the Duke's back to make sure no one would suffer consequences. Her sister makes Celine promise she'll never do something that dangerous again, and they're happy that everything turned out fine. Jenna doesn't want to interrupt the sister's moment, but reminds Celine that she needs to get ready quickly for the temple, and the Duke will probably be arriving soon to pick her up. Adele says not to worry, and that during the time Celine is at the temple, she will personally make sure to take good care of Will in her sister's absence. Apparently, things ended sooner than expected, and the Duke doesn't seem very pleased. An hour ago, while they were at the temple, the Archbishop said that although he could feel the power of the goddess in Celine, it was too weak for him to acknowledge her as the chosen one. The Duke tries to argue, saying that she purified the black crystal, but the Archbishop says that the power of the goddess has a unique color to him, and he can always see it clearly. Of course, if the person hasn't used all their magic at once. Celine realizes right away that it's because she used her magic on Will, but she takes the opportunity to correct the story and says that she would never do something like using up all her magic. In conclusion, the Archbishop says that he really can see the power of the goddess, but it's so weak that she'll probably be able to use very little of it, and because of that, she can't be the chosen one. The Duke is disappointed, but Celine is happy that everything is going back to the way it should be, and now she just has to wait for the magic to awaken in Adele, and everything will be fine. When she arrives at the mansion, the protagonist runs to Will's room to see how he is and is very happy to see that he's awake and well. She asks if he's feeling any pain, but when she looks at Will's face, she realizes something is wrong. Why does he have golden eyes just like Prince Louis? And now, has she finally noticed that Will is the second prince? Who will be the protagonist that ends up as Celine's romantic partner? Will it be Prince Louis or our obsessive Will? Will Celine fall in love with one of them? Or will she keep worshipping her sister forever? Since this story is progressing a bit more slowly, they're still just kids for now. The romance part will start to develop more in the upcoming chapters. So if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel so I can keep bringing you the next chapters. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Kisses.